The presidential race stepped up a gear this week as businessman Peter Casey became the third investor from Dragon's Den to declare his intention to run.
Peter Casey will be here at 8:15 this morning to tell us why he has decided to add his name to the growing list of presidential hopefuls. But joining us now to discuss the most likely candidates to go up against Michael D. Higgins and the other stories making the headlines this morning is Ellen Dunning, Director of the Irish Academy of Public Relations. And Ellen, we're just double checking, are you going to declare here this morning? Are you going to throw your name in the hat?
I don't think I'll do it this morning, but you might invite me back again at a later date.
But you never
I'll
know.
hold my position.
Look, I mean, it is incredible. 14 names yesterday, a potential 15th name this morning with Councillor Mannix Flynn saying there's so many names in at this stage, so many candidates, so many Dragon's Den reality stars and businessmen, and many other people who might not be that well known, certainly not politicians. He said it's disrespectful and ridiculous at this stage. Would you agree?
I don't know that it's disrespectful. I think, honestly, people are using it as an opportunity to get some publicity. A lot of them aren't serious. I really don't believe they think they will be standing for the presidency. But the bigger issue, I think, is what they're actually planning to run on, or the issues that they're choosing. Yesterday, I was listening to people saying that one said that she would not sign the legislation on abortion if she was president because she's against it. It's not the function of the president to decide which piece of legislation they will sign. President decides, has the right to refer legislation if they believe it's non-constitutional.
Over to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court makes a decision.
And the Supreme Court makes the decision, and if the Supreme Court says that is constitutional legislation, the president signs it. So it's not up to the president to play God. So that was one thing. There was another candidate who said that she was running because she wanted to expose the connection between taxes and corruption. And I thought, OK, but the president is not a crusader, so that's not the president's job either.
So they're showing that they just don't really understand the function of the president or the limitations, perhaps, of the role of the president.
I think they're running with a vision to do something as a well-known person in Ireland who is not actually the president, but that happens to be the job handle. So I actually found myself wondering, is there a job for the government to bring out a pamphlet and to do a social media campaign that says, this is the role and function of the president. This is what the president can and cannot do. Don't be asking them, will they save the world? It's not their job. It's very much a ceremonial role. It's an important ceremonial role. We should have a president. But I think there's a lot of confusion about what the president can do. But maybe it's just people playing to get a bit of media publicity and get their names out there.
Well, among the people who've thrown their hat, we've got into the ring. We've got a Marilyn Monroe impersonator. We've got a Donald Trump supporter. We also have somebody who has changed their name to William Delaney in 1957 to 1970. This is an artist, Kilkenny artist by the name of Seamus Nolan, and he's doing it because he wants to represent all the children who were put into care. And he was going to change his name to that, and then if he got a nomination and ended up in the Áras, he would then revert back to his name. And then William Delaney, who died in 1970, aged 13, that would be accorded a state presidential funeral. Yeah. Now, you cannot have a go at somebody who wants to do something in that situation.
Oh, absolutely not, and he's obviously very sincere.
Obviously, and I want to be very careful about that. But it's still, that's not what this is about. And
it's not, and this is the thing that has really riled Mannix Flynn. It's the reason why he says, look, the whole thing is getting out of control and maybe I should run myself. It's not what it's about. I accept that the man is very sincere, most likely, and it would put a spotlight on it, but that's not the role of the president. The role of the president, it's very much a ceremonial role. And what I wondered about was, you have all of these different people like Marilyn Monroe impersonators, whatever, they're all perfectly entitled to put their names forward, but really it comes down to the nominations.
Yeah.
It will all be sorted out. It'll be in the wash.
Realistically, how many people will be nominated? What do you think the field will be narrowed down to?
Ooh, well,
6, 7? I
think it's going to be really interesting because you definitely have the president, who apparently nominates himself. Isn't that completely wrong? He's the president. He should be nominated by the government, I think. Sean Gallagher, within 24 hours of saying that he was going to run, had something like 12 councils offering to nominate him, so he's definitely in the race. I think you'll have another 2 or 3 maybe with him. You've definitely got a Sinn Féin, so that's 3, so possibly 2 more.
So who will the other 2 be? Let's look at some of the kind of more high-profile names, I suppose. Gavin Duffy, Gemma O'Doherty, Joan Freeman, Peter House, Kevin Sharkey, and now Peter Casey. Out of those 5 names, and I would say those are the
John
5 that people might think are in with the best chance. Who would you think if you're going to put maybe 2 more names on that ballot paper?
I think Gavin Duffy is running. He's very serious about running. I'd love to know what are they putting in the tea in Dragon's Den, because we've 3 dragons running. I'd just love to know. There's something in the sugar or something in the tea.
I don't know if it's tea they're drinking, to be honest. I think some of us are beginning to wonder.
I am not going to be a party to that slur. But seriously, I think when he declared, he was very serious about running. And interestingly enough, if you look at the different approach, Sean Gallagher, if you take the 3 dragons, Sean Gallagher is kind of was where Gavin Duffy is now 7 years ago. So he had the profile, he was a current dragon, people knew him very well. Sean Gallagher's profile has changed. I don't think he's as well known publicly.
And what's he done in the meantime?
But he's obviously done a lot politically, because he's got 12 councils coming out to support him. So he's been moving in a different circle since.
And Peter Casey would say he's doing that too.
Yeah, what about the theory that the 2 of them are stalking horses for Sean Gallagher?
I don't think so, but I think Gavin Duffy is very serious about running. I'm not sure that Peter Casey is. I think Peter Casey, now I met Peter about a month ago and he's a lovely guy, and I think Peter Casey might be he has said he wants to run as an independent in Donegal in the next election. I think he might be using it as an opportunity.
He has tried unsuccessfully to run for the Seanad, so he has made some connections, connections with councils.
He wants to put himself out there. He wants people to be aware that he is a politician with an agenda. But the curious thing about the difference between Peter Casey and Gavin Duffy is that Gavin Duffy said, when he was asked would he take the reduced salary the President was on, he said, no, I will not. I want the whole salary, because I'm going to mortgage my house and I want to make the money back. And Peter Casey has said, no, I won't take any of the salary. And curiously enough, the thing that annoyed me about that, I know Charlie Flanagan was saying that it demeaned the office of the President not to take the salary. Heck, if you're rich enough not to take 300,000, don't take it. It's of no consequence one way or the other. But the thing that really bothered me was he said he'd take the salary and give it to each of the councils to divide among the charities.
Buying votes?
And I think that's completely
in advance
wrong.
of the nominations?
I think people are going to be very uncomfortable by that.
Well, do you know what?
September 26th is the date. That's when we're going to know the names.
That's when we know which of the 5 are in.
Peter will be in this morning, and we will put that to him.
Yes.
Let's move on to another high office being appointed or being fulfilled. Drew Harris, the new Garda Commissioner, will be taking up his post very shortly, and I suppose the controversies about his appointment initially have now been reignited again, and it kind of boils down to this for me. I don't think it's a matter of the man's competence. I think the man is highly qualified for his job. It's a matter of his allegiance. He was a very highly placed officer in the British Security Services by virtue of his position in the PSNI. He had to swear an oath of allegiance to that, and also he's bound by their Official Secrets Act. He's now going to be our Garda Commissioner. He's now going to be bound by our Official Secret Act. How can he serve 2 masters and 2 oaths?
I don't have an issue with that at all.
Do you not?
No, I don't have an issue with that at all. I think we really needed somebody who was an outsider, in inverted commas. We needed somebody from out who hadn't come through the ranks of the Gardaí, and that person was always going to come from the PSNI or the Canadian Mounties, or they were going to come from somewhere else where they had rightly sworn allegiance to the state that they were working for then. I don't have a problem with him swearing allegiance. He now has to swear allegiance to the Irish state, and he has to take the Irish oath of secrecy, and I really don't have a problem with that.
Well, given the history between the 2 countries, you don't see that there's a conflict or a difficulty?
No, funny, I don't either. I think it's actually awful, and it's a real indictment of the man's professionalism and his perhaps personality and his integrity at this stage, that there are so many doubts about his ability to do this job because of his previous job with the British Security Forces and the MI5.
Do you know, strangely
he's
enough,
a highly competent, intelligent person, and I'm sure, like anybody, moving companies, which is basically what you're doing, you're moving jobs. You start a new job and you start it afresh, no?
But strangely enough, he may actually have an advantage over somebody like a Canadian Mountie, because he has worked on the 2 sides of the border, if you like. So he's worked the British side, he's now working the Irish side. I think a lot of what he knows that he has sworn to secrecy with is contained in his head and will be very useful to us.
And what he's
think
also
it's an advantage.
done, which is very, very helpful, is that he has been part of the reform of the RUC into the PSNI, and we need very brave reforms if we are going to improve the Garda Síochána in this country. And we need somebody who does perhaps have an understanding of how the Garda Síochána operates.
Do you know, it's a funny thing. I looked at all of the CVs and all of the commentary about his CVs, and he's highly qualified and he's been policing for so long, and he has a primary in, I can't remember, is it economics and politics or something. And I kept thinking, really, the skill that he needs is change management. Because the whole culture of the Gardaí needs to change.
Ellen, is there a grander plan involved in this? Because we talk about the reform of the Gardaí, and we all know it needs root and branch, but one of the other big reforms that has to happen in justice is the separation of security and intelligence from policing. And would this not be the perfect time to do it? And would he not be the perfect man to usher it in?
Oh, I think he would.
That he becomes in charge of policing, and he does root and branch policing reform, which he did very successfully in the north, and then security and intelligence moves to somebody else who doesn't have any conflicts.
The big advantage he has is that he hasn't come through the system, so he's not stepping on your toes or your toes, because we've all known each other for years.
He is a man who'll step on anybody's toes if he thinks it's right, by the way.
Exactly. So I think he has an opportunity to come in and say, let's separate the two. Here's how the new system runs. And I think if he gets long enough at it, he will change it.
There's just something else I wanted to mention in the papers this morning that I thought was very interesting. The Public Service Pay Commission was asked to examine recruitment and retention issues within the health sector, in particular, I suppose, recruitment and retention of nurses. And obviously the unions for nurses are saying, look, better pay and better conditions is what we need to recruit and retain nurses. They've come back and said, no, actually...
There is no issue.
There is no issue. The findings, I would say, are going to provoke a lot of anger. They've said, actually, you're quite well paid. They've accepted the Department of Public Expenditure's research. 82% of midwives nurses paid over 40,000 in comparison to your European counterparts. You're very well paid. No issue there.
I thought it was really interesting. They said that the allowances needed to be looked at and some of the allowances needed to be increased, but not the basic pay. And the argument seems to have been, or the argument that was put forward for an increase in basic pay was that people can't afford to rent, they can't afford to live, they haven't enough money. And the counter argument was, well, actually, it's not our issue to decide whether or not you can pay rent, and that the whole review of government and public sector pay will actually bring an increase to the nurses, so they shouldn't be separately looked at. I don't know enough about it to know whether or not...
Do you see the potential of strike here?
Oh, probably. And I also wonder how much of the decision was based on the fact that if you said, well, yes, you have a good case and you should get more money, you know that the ball will start rolling and everybody will look for it.
When you're dealing with public sector pay, isn't it?
Cheers.
I'm going to have to leave it there.
Thank you. Now, plenty more to come on the programme. We'll be back after the short break.